day 3. Can you believe it that it's already been 3 days of us actually being together? And I really hope that you guys have actually been learning so far. And yeah, I'm really hoping that you guys are actually getting some value in this. So as you guys know, today, well, this whole week we've been focusing purely on what is Python Django. And we've obviously established that Django is a back-end technology that actually helps you to build websites using Python, right? So without further ado, let me jump straight into the presentation for today. Okay, just let me know if you guys can just see my screen.
We're waiting for it to come through.
Are you guys seeing it already?
No, not yet. And nothing on my side yet.
Just let me know if you guys can just see it.
Okay, it's coming through now. Yes, there we go. There we go. I can see it.
All right, awesome. All right, so once again, as I said, welcome guys. This is part 3, day 3 of the web development with Django. And yeah, let's jump straight right into it. So just the agenda for today, what are we going to be talking about is that we're going to be just talking about what we actually learned in the last 2 days, right? So the recap is that, remember, we spoke about all things Python, we spoke about all things Django, we spoke about front end development, we spoke about back end development, we even touched on things like Microsoft web hosting services. We spoke about GitHub and all those wonderful things. And then yesterday, obviously, what we did was we actually jumped into the actual code, right? So I actually showed you guys how to actually set up and structure your websites. I showed you guys how to actually, I touched on CSS. I spoke about how to link those pages together with CSS, and we're actually just just playing around and familiarizing ourselves with how the web development structure actually is, right? So remember, I spoke about the head, the body, and the footer, and so forth. So basically today we're going to be now really diving into the crux of it all, right? So today we're actually going to be really diving into it. But obviously, first and foremost, I want to just quickly talk about 3 different kinds of developers, right? So remember yesterday I spoke about there's a back end developer, there's a front end developer, then there's a full stack developer, right? So in today's session, obviously, as I said, we're going to jump into now actually creating our Django app. We're going to be working on the HTML, CSS, and then we're going to hopefully push our code into GitHub if we've got enough time. But if not, this will definitely happen all tomorrow when we also host our website online. All right. So for those of you guys don't even know me, my name is Koketso Moto Otata, and these are just all of my credentials. These are all of my contact details. If you need any help, if you've got any questions, please do make sure that you reach out to me, and I will definitely be there to more than willing to help you with any questions. But as I said, this is not all about me. It's definitely about you guys. So let's carry on. So let's talk about front end technologies, right? So what exactly are front end technologies? So if you guys actually look at the definition of what a front end developer is, remember I did say that a front end developer is basically someone that is responsible for making web pages, right? So web pages meaning everything that you actually see whenever you type www.google.youtube or anything, whatever you see that comes back, it's exactly what a front end developer does, right? So he is the person that's responsible for the look and feel as well as the user experience much more enjoyable, right? So think about your favorite website in terms of whatever you like on there. It's exactly what a front end developer actually is responsible for. Now I'm going to actually talk about what are the technologies or the tools that they actually use, right? So I don't know if you guys still remember, but on the first day I spoke about something called React, right? So React JS is actually a JavaScript library that actually helps you to build interfaces based on UI and UI components. So what does that mean is that React basically it is a lightweight framework that you can use to actually create front end websites. So think about the recent applications that you guys use. So most probably it uses React, right? So React actually helps you to build these really smooth, lightweight front end interfaces that we actually divide them all up into UI components. Now, this is not really a React kind of series, but I do actually do have one where I actually explain the whole UI components and how React and JavaScript works using the virtual DOM and how it communicates with the internet and so forth. But all you just need to know is that as a developer, there's something called a front end, and one of the tools or one of the superpowers is actually called React. I personally use React on most of my projects, and I've worked on even collaborated with some people using React specifically. And I will tell you why I personally prefer React and why you should also consider React. Not that I am biased towards it, but there's a lot of upside towards it. Right. So these are some of the companies that actually use React on their front end, right? So as I mentioned, React was actually created by the developers of Facebook in 2006 or 2004, and obviously it has obviously evolved and grown ever since. Now, moving on to and obviously we all know how Netflix is, WhatsApp, Uber, Instagram, and so forth. Now, another front end technology is Angular, right? So Angular basically it is also a JavaScript framework, but it actually uses TypeScript. So TypeScript is another form of JavaScript, but it's just a different version. So like I said, this is not really a JavaScript talk, but there is a variation called TypeScript. It's quite new, it's quite recent. It's also open source and so forth. So Angular was actually developed by the developers from Google. So this is more a Google product. So the benefits of actually using Angular is especially when you're using a lot of data and huge projects. This is when Angular actually comes, because Angular actually is a framework, right? So remember, a framework helps you with dealing with back end, deals with APIs, it deals with the cloud. So Angular helps you in that sense. But I personally prefer React on the front end, and I choose Django on the back end. And obviously, this is a Django talk. I'm going to be telling you, and you guys probably will know by now why we actually use Django. Think of Django, it actually replaces Angular, and obviously React on the front end will always just use front on its own. Now, if you're asking yourself which one should you go into in terms of Angular versus Django, you can use both, but ideally I would not say so, because the thing is you're now using two frameworks for one project, which not really good practice when it comes to development, because you have to think about memory, you have to think about size, runtime, and so forth. So using two frameworks in one project, it's actually going to weigh down in terms of the speed, in terms of user experience, and memory, right? So it might actually slow down the smoothness of your application. So um, as I said, it really all depends on the kind of developer, the kind of project you're building, and what team you're in. But if you are definitely in Google, Angular uses Google, and Google uses Angular. So one of the benefits, as I also said, is it's best if you're using it for very, very big projects. All right. So yeah, some of the companies that are actually using Angular as well. So as I said, it was developed by Google. So you have things like Upwork, you have YouTube, and all of these PayPal, all of these other top leading industries. Now the reason why um, so let's look at the difference between a React and Angular, right? So remember, I did say that Angular basically it is a JavaScript framework, but it is built on React. I mean on TypeScript. But React basically it is a JavaScript library which is based on JSX. So JSX just simply means it is a JavaScript extension. So it actually uses HTML and CSS in in it, right? And I did say that Angular is actually used for more complex projects. Unlike when React, we just use it for just building front end components, right? So if you are going into front end, even the learning curve, it's much easier. I picked up React quite easily compared to Angular, and as I said, that's why I actually use Angular. Um, I mean, I use React personally. I choose React more opposed to Angular. And even compared to Google Trends right now. So right now, currently, if you go on Google Trends, so Google Trends is actually it shows you and compares certain either topics or whatnot to each other, and it actually looks at the popularity between the two. And as you guys can see that for the last year or so, and React has is obviously way more advanced than Angular, and it's much more popular. And this is on a global scale, right? So if you look at it on worldwide, React is actually much more easily receptive um, in terms of in the industry, right? So now let's talk about backend, right? So backend basically is this is basically responsible for the server side. So what I mean by server side, each website actually has to have a server to actually run on it, right? So think about it as a server. It's actually it helps you to run your website locally onto your machine. So usually in the past, you'd have to either purchase a server or purchase a URL that comes with the server, and in that case it would actually help you to build your website onto your system. But now with new technologies, you don't have to buy a server or a username or a link or somewhere online to actually host your website, right? So these backend technologies, um, you can also use them for your mobile apps as well, right? So you can use it for your mobile apps, you can use it for even for databases, right? So, but just think about it that as a backend, it's actually a technology or that you really cannot see, and it's just all the magic that happens in the background. And obviously we, as you can see, it deals with servers, databases, security, APIs, and it's very scalable and stuff like that. So this is really where you have to take a lot of thinking involved, right? So some of the technologies that actually use backend is Node.js. So remember, I did say, guys, please make sure that you actually download Node.js because it is a backend technology. And remember, I said that Node.js actually helps us to communicate with all of these other technologies, right? So Node.js, as you can also hear, it is a JavaScript backend framework, and it is compatible. It is open source, meaning it's got a very huge community. It's cross-platform, and basically you can use it and run it on any single system. Another one is called PHP. So if you know anything about web development, PHP, it's like the grandfathers of web development. This was one of the first servers, but with PHP, you also had to go through the thing of running a local server, and a local server meaning XAMPP or something of that sort. So this is PHP for me. It's, as I said, it's quite an old technology. Some companies still use it, but we've got better technologies than PHP. But yeah, as I said, it is the grandfathers of backend technologies. I mean, it is it's a hypertext a preprocessor, so meaning it works perfectly well with HTML and CSS. And now let's look at full stack development. So what is full stack? So think about the front end, think about the back end, and put it all together. Now it is quite, as you can see, there is quite a lot to learn in the front end, and there's quite a lot to learn in the back end. But essentially, you then become called a full stack developer. Now, depending obviously on the company you work for or what project you are, sometimes it is a 50-50 job, like it's 50% front end, 50% back end. But predominantly, most companies focus a lot on 70% front end and 30% back end, because with the back end, the only thing you have to just worry about is just making sure that, for instance, if you're connected to a database, just making sure your database structures are okay, if all the queries are running properly, and so forth. On the front end, however, obviously there's constant changes. So if you're running an e-commerce website, the only thing you just have to worry about is that, okay, I just need to obviously showcase that I've got new products onto my website, and I need to make sure that that specific item is linked to um, a key onto my website, and then actually the database will handle all of that. So as you guys can see, that when you are a full stack, it's much more responsibility. So but there's quite a lot of stacks out there. There's the perm stack, I mean, there's the acronyms are just crazy, but the most popular stacks right now, and this is not really the traditional way you can actually follow it, because you can actually choose whatever technology. But I'm just going to actually explain what this diagram means. So you have something called the mean stack, right? So the mean stack is MongoDB, Express.js, Angular, and Node.js. Then you have the MERN stack, which is MongoDB, Express, React, and Node.js. So if you can look at this graph over here, right? So MongoDB, basically it's a type of NoSQL database. Um, and then Express. So Express is another JavaScript library that actually helps you to communicate. So remember once in Django I spoke about views and MVT. So this is like basically the controller. This is what actually happens in terms of communicating with our front end. And as you guys can see, you can either use Angular or you can either use React. And then Node.js actually just supports the communication between the two, right? So this is typically how traditional websites used to be in terms of full stack. So you'd have either a mean stack or a merge stack. But obviously now today the technologies are always changing and so forth. So we don't have to worry about stuff like that. But it doesn't only stop from there. As a full stack developer, there's much more responsibilities where you actually think about API configurations, right? Is there a third party API? Are you web scraping? Is there SEO optimizations? You have unit testing. There is continuous integration and continuous deployment pipelines. There is version control. There is database management and design integrations more often, and security. So as you guys can see, becoming a full stack developer really is going to take time, and you really have to master the craft of really understanding what you are really doing, right? So as I mentioned, that my personal opinion is that I would suggest you first go into front end and then into back end, so that you can have a grasp of becoming ultimately a full stack developer, right? So once again, just like we were supposed to do yesterday, we are now gonna obviously jump straight into the Django, building our first Django application. And remember, I did say, guys, please make sure that your Python is properly installed, because if you do not have that, you're gonna have problems moving forth. And yet again, just for reference's sake, you guys can definitely check out the Django application, our website. It has all the documentations. It will go into finer details. I mean, just as yesterday, I spoke about the Django architecture, and today we're actually gonna see how it actually works. All right. So that being said, thank you very much. This is the O of the presentation. So now I'm gonna jump now into coding time. And if there are any questions for now, please do let me know. You can pop them in the chat. You can unmute yourself. You can ask any questions before we start the practical session. Okay, so seems like there's no. Okay, so let me just actually do this. Let me just pop the link for you guys actually have it on that. So this is the link where you guys can actually read up on the Django application, right? It is quite easy. It is, they actually give you examples of creating other applications on the site as well. So you guys can just definitely check it on the chat and so forth. So, all right, guys, without further ado, let's jump straight into the coding. So the first things first, what I want to do is I want to actually show you how you guys set up a Django project. All right. So right, so what I always like to do is I would first and foremost create a folder, right? So I'm just going to call this, I'm going to say Django, let's call it Django. You can name it whatever you guys want to name it. It's absolutely fine according to you. And inside of my folder, right, so as you guys can see, it's pretty much empty, all right? Now, Um, if you're using Windows 7 or any other one, it's perfectly fine. So what I want you guys to do is I'm also going to show you and teach you like shortcut keys that you guys can actually use, which so shortcut keys is just like mini tricks that you guys can use for yourselves in terms of when it comes to web development, right? So the first things first is that I want you guys to go over here, right? On this URL over here. If not, I think it's you can hold Shift and right click onto your um okay, no, it doesn't work that way. So you can just click on the path, and what I want you to do is just type in CMD, right? And it's gonna pop up over there. Now, the reason why I want you to actually make sure that you clicking you make sure that you clicked onto that URL is because it's gonna open up a terminal that's actually going to be linked to your site, right? And then what I want you guys then to do is that the first things first, what we want to do is we want to actually create our first Django application, right? Um, all right. So first and foremost, I remember, guys, I just want to make the double so that just to make sure that we're all on the same page. We want to just actually double check. I don't know if I can zoom this. Okay, that might be better. So the first thing first is that I want to actually just double check and see that do I have Python properly installed, right? So if I just type in Python into my so this is what we call the command line, right? So this is what we call CLI, command line interface. It's quite popular in the industry, and you actually really need to know how to use the command line. It's one of those things that you have to understand and really are going to be using quite often. So this is what we call the command line. So this is how you actually check to see if you're actually using the right version of Python, right? So, okay, fine, I've got Python that is properly installed and so forth. Now, the first things first is that if you also want to check if, all right, so I just want to just check, do I have, right, so if the Python version does show, then it means that you actually installed Python correctly. Now, another thing is that I'm going to show you guys how to actually install Django, right? So remember, Django is a Python library. So now the first things first, what you want to do is you want to say pip install Django, right? Just like that. Okay. So as soon as you press enter, so I've already got Django installed, so it might obviously be much quicker than the way you guys do it. So as soon as you press enter, you will then start seeing that all of these Python packages are going to start installing onto your system. So however, you do need to be connected to the internet because remember, it's now pulling all of these necessary files. So as you guys can see, mine is already saying requirement already satisfied. So meaning I've already got Django installed into my system. So for you guys, you'll see it will run a command. So this yellow command, it's really not going to be an issue. So I'll just quickly pop that command in the chat as well. So it's going to be pip install Django. So guys, just make sure it's spaces, no capitals as well, so that Python will actually recognize it. So once you've got that all installed, okay, what's this? Right, so once you've got that all installed, that means that your Django app is actually up and running. And how do we also check if Django is properly installed? Well, it will obviously, we just installed it now and it's showing there. So if you've got any issues installing Django right now, then it would really mean that you installed Python incorrectly, because pip is actually a Python library as well, pipeline as well. So if you're having issues at this stage, then it means you have not downloaded Python very well. And if that's so, please do make sure that you just shoot and just contact me, and if that's the case and so forth. But moving right along. So this means that, okay, Django is already installed and everything. Cool. So now the first thing we want to then do is now we want to actually create our first Django application, right? So once again, you can close your command line. And what we want to do is then we go CMD once again, and we open our command line. Now, what I want to then do is, first things first, I want to then create my Django app. So this is how we actually do. So we're going to say Django dash admin. And if I say, I think it's help, it's actually going to show all of the commands that we can use in Django, right? So these are all the things. So we have things like start project, start app, test. If you want to test your application, you want to flush. So this is when you're using SQL. So run server, you'll see we're going to use that. Make migrations, make messages, migrate. So these are all of the commands that Django actually uses. But some of them you don't really have to know. But as you go along, the popular ones definitely start project, start app. Um, Obviously, when you start using SQL, meaning you connecting it to a database, run server, you'll see we're going to use that. To migrate, we might use make migrations as well. So flush is just dumping data, removing data. So these are all just simple commands that you guys can use. But obviously, what we want to do is we want to start a project, right? So how we do that is that we just simply say Django dash admin space, and we're going to say start project, and then you have a space. Now here is where you actually are going to give your application a name, right? So I'd like to always give, and remember I spoke about naming conventions, always make sure that you have correct, proper naming conventions, right? Let me just make this bigger, right? So it's going to be Django admin start project. Remember, guys, small letters. Otherwise, you might get an error somewhere. And what I'm gonna call I'm just gonna say mine is called website. Website. Or let me just say my website, since it's my first website, and I press enter. Now, if you just move your command line, you will then see there is now a folder called my website, right? Yeah, we can close this for now. And you'll see in my website, and if you double click on it, you will then see there's another folder called my website. And these are the kind of files that we actually going to be getting, right? So remember, some of them, they're not really that important, but you will then see, some are quite important. But I want to talk about the manage file right now quickly. So the manage file actually just helps us to actually run commands through Python or through Django, right? So this is basically like a helper folder that it has a couple of methods and it has a couple of things inside that you really don't have to really worry about for now. But essentially, this is how you actually start your Python application. So you have a my app. So Django also follows this thing called projects and applications, right? So in every single project, you can have multiple applications. So this is what we call um, it's actually called I forgot the right term, but it's called modular code, right? So meaning you are breaking down your code into smaller chunks, because reason why it's actually advisable to actually really divide your work into smaller portions is because in case there is a mistake or in case something goes wrong, it's going to be much easier for you to find and track your mistake, right? All right, so enough talking. So now the first things first, what I want to then do is, okay, so I've got my application running and you're like, okay, Google, so now what do I now do? What do I do next? All right, so we can continue going to CMD and I press enter. And now the next command is that now I want to actually run my Python project, right? So then, so what I want to then do is I'm going to say Python manage.py. So remember that manage folder that I spoke about. This is actually going to help us to run our website. So we're going to say run server. Hit enter. You will now see that it's going to now start running into smart browser. It's still loading. All right, so as you guys can see, now you will see there's something called Django version 4.0, right? So maybe you guys might have a different version than mine because I got mine quite a while ago. And it will actually show you that, okay, my website dot settings, okay, fine, starting development server at this. So this basically is the URL or the path where our website is. Now, a quick tip is that if you want to actually access this, you can just quickly highlight and then press Control C. It will copy this link. And then what it will then do is I can just go into my browser, paste it over there, and if I hit enter, you will then see Python, Django now up and running, and it will say the installation worked successfully and congratulations. So if you guys have gotten this far, well done, congratulations. That means now Django is fully loaded onto your system, and now you are good to go. Right. Awesome stuff. So now we are moving. We are actually going in the right direction. Okay, so you don't have to really close this for now. You don't have, yeah, so you can actually close that, which is actually going to kill the server. But now what I want to actually do is I want to actually access all of my files in CS Code, right? So another trick, what I want to show you guys is you can also go to CMD once again. And if you have CS Code downloaded, please also, as I said, we are going to be using CS Code in this instance, and it's going to help us in many, many senses. So how to access your files in CS Code is go once again to CMD, and what you want to just say is code space dot. What this will do if you press enter, it will actually open VS Code with your files already there, right? As you guys can see, all of a sudden, VS Code will start running. Give it a second. Okay, just say yes, I trust authors. And there we go. So now you guys can see, if I just zoom in a bit. Okay. So as you guys can see, this is exactly the same way as how my files are. If I just minimize that, you guys can see my website, MySQL database. So the database, don't really worry about it. It's a default database that comes with Django, but you don't really have to use it. And there is my PY file. So you're probably asking yourself, how come my VS Code looks different? So there's something I want us to actually go on the left hand side. There's something called extensions. Now there's a couple of extensions that I actually want you guys to actually get that's going to make our coding life much easier. All right. So inside of extensions, so you're asking yourself, what is an extension? So an extension basically means it's just VS Code having plugins or certain tricks and tools to help life much easier. So remember in HTML, I always used to say every time you open a tag, you close a tag, you open a tag, you close a tag. Well, obviously, we don't want to really always do that all the time. So things like extensions actually helps us with this. So I think my side is just loading updates of latest extensions. But the ones that I really want you guys to really get, and I'll pop them in the chats right now if you check. So the first one I want you guys to get is called Prettier, right? And the second one I want you guys to get is um, auto tag, right? So basically, as you can see in the search icon, I think mine is taking time because it's loading one of the extensions. I've got tons of extensions, so on my side, it might just take a while. But what you can just simply do is just type them into your, so hopefully it will pop up. If I say auto tag, all right, as you can see, I've got auto tag installed. What this will do, it will just help you, automatically repair your HTML tags, whether it's JavaScript and so forth, right? So it looks something like this. Another thing that you also want to then get is Prettier. So Prettier. So this just actually, makes your code look much more readable. It makes it look nice as well. So okay, so I've got an update, so it's also installing that. And another one that you guys want to also get is Azure. I just search that. I think it should be Azure Tools, right? So I'll just pop them in the chat right now. Azure Tools. And what Azure Tools is going to actually help us to do is, remember, we are going to host our website onto Azure, right? So this is going to actually help us to actually push our website to Azure, right? I'll also show you obviously how it actually looks like onto its dashboard tomorrow, right? So you can also get Azure Tools. Um, Another one that you can definitely get is, okay, we can also just get a few Python extensions. So just say Python. All right. I've got Python also installed. So as you guys can see, it seems like I've got quite a lot of extensions just to that's updating in the background. All right, so that's also fine. So I'd also get Python for VS Code, which is also quite helpful. But this is also just as fine. And last but not least, we also want to just get some Django extensions. So you can search Django, you can search Python, right? So let's go here. So these are just extensions that are gonna just help you in future, right? So in terms of just building your website and so forth. So as you guys can see, I've already got some Django templates and snippets and whatsoever. With time, with experience, you'll actually understand why it's quite useful for you to actually use extensions, because some things, you just want VS Code to help you with, and so forth. Okay, so enough about extensions. That's all well and done, and we are cool. We're good to go. So now let's focus on our code, right? So if I look into my file, you see that obviously we have my website and everything. My website, it's actually running perfectly well. I can see that Django is running perfectly well onto my site as well, and so forth. So now the next thing that I want to actually now do is data. So now the one thing that remember I told you guys about the structure of what um, Django follows, right? So usually in development we use something called MVC, MVT, sorry, MVC, yes, MVC. But Django actually follows MVT, right? So it's model, templates, and views. So now I actually want to show you guys how to actually render your first template, all right? So now, obviously, what we want to then first do is, we've got our Django project is now running nice and proper. So now the one thing I want you guys to do is go to the terminal, right? And you say new terminal. So remember our the process where we did this whole CMD thing. That's why VS Code is so cool, because now what we can do is just close that, and VS Code will actually handle all of that for us. So if you open up a new terminal, maybe some of you guys might ask you, do you want a new one or whatever? Just make sure that you open a new terminal. So it's right over here. You just click on that, and it's going to say new terminal. And this window at the bottom over here will obviously pop open. Okay, so I've got two terminals open. So it's still quite loading my parts and everything. But as you can see, it's this window down here at the bottom. So now remember I spoke about Django has this thing called applications and apps, right? I mean projects versus apps. So I want to quickly tell you the difference. Is that what is the difference between a project and an app? So basically, an app is a web application that does something, right? So your applications, either you have an application that connects to the database. Maybe you have another application that deals with calculations. Maybe you have another application that maybe handles a voting system and so forth. So remember, I said that you need to break down your program into different sections. That's exactly what an application is all about. And a project basically just houses the whole mechanism, right? So think about it like a building block. So you have your root application, your root project, and then you have many applications inside. So since we're only building one website, we're only going to have one application inside. All right. So let me just do that. So now the first things first is that what do we then want to do? All right. So once you've seen that your terminal is all up and running, We can also just run the same command again in terms of running our server. So we can just say okay, okay, there we go. Right. So as you guys can see, it's actually showing us the file directory in terms of where we're actually working in our project. So we can just do the whole say Python space manage dot py run server. So remember, guys, these are just keywords that you are going to always run into and just familiarize yourself when it comes to Python Django, right? So you have to obviously practice it, memorize it, and make sure that you are quite familiar with the syntax. So if I just press enter, and then obviously it's then going to what's going on now? Okay, okay, let's see. Okay, I think maybe because my let's see. Terminal. Okay, so I think it was, yeah, guys. So on my side, I think I just have a lot of updates that some of these extensions are taking some time. So let's just run our server once again. And just close this, close that. Let's run it again. All right, so let's try that again. So we're gonna say Python manage dot py run server. So I'll also just pop that in the chat for you guys as well, just so that our Python is actually running. So it's going to be Python manage.py run server. All right, so guys, also remember, just please make sure that everything is going to be in smaller cases, no spaces, yes, some spaces in between, but no capitals, please. Otherwise, Python and Django won't actually understand what are you trying to do. All right, so okay, so my server should be running. All right, so let's just wait for it to run. So if I hit refresh, all right. So if it so what this means is that, as you can see, it's crashed to show that okay, my server is not yet up and running, right? So VS Code is still spinning this up, and if I just keep refreshing, Okay, it's taking a while on. Okay, but I mean, I'm surely on your side, it should be actually up and running. It should be perfectly fine. It should be running. That's cool. So because I think mine is still taking a while with updates, I'm just gonna actually do a shortcut over here. And let me just quickly navigate to that folder. You guys don't have to actually do this. You can do this also in VS Code, but I just wanna, just keep it moving. Right. So another thing that you guys want to do this, okay, so once it's actually up and running, you can actually see that, okay, now it's actually now it's running. If I refresh, it should be all right. Cool. So now the one thing, guys, I want to then show you is I want to then show you how to page onto your website, because as you will see from tomorrow, when we actually start filling in our actual website, so the site that we're going to actually build is it's just a one pager. It's not going to be too hectic and everything, but it's very important for you guys to really understand the concept. So to actually break out of your server, you can just press Control C, right? So it will actually stop running the server. All right, so it's stopped running the server there. So then what I want you guys to do is write in your terminal. Mine's still okay. So write in your terminal. Well, we then have to create our first application, right? So how are we then going to do that? So now the first thing that you want to then do is I'm then going to say the following. I'm going to say Python manage, and I hope you guys can see. Let me try to do this. All right, manage.py. And now we're gonna then start an app, right? And you then have to give your app a name, right? So you can be whatever, but I'm just gonna call mine site just for simplicity reasons. And I press enter. Now you'll see on my left-hand side, there's gonna be a couple of files that are gonna start building up. All right, so Django is like spinning up an app, and we say, oh, did you mean start? Did I spell it wrong? See, I probably spelled it wrong, so it's str app and give it a name. Wait a minute, please, another name. Okay, so I guess site doesn't work. Let me just call it my site. All right, so I just called it my site. So depending on what actually you guys are working on, right? As I said, you guys have to divide your apps into a specific region. So if you have databases, you probably have to name this database or something like that. All right. So now, as you guys can see, so we've got two folders, right? So what does this actually mean? This actually means that our site is actually inside of our my website. So if I look at my file, right? So we have site and website. So somehow, somewhere, we actually need to tell Django to actually communicate with everything, right? So how do we then do that? So if I actually go inside of my site website, as you can see, there's something called migrations, there's admin, there's apps, there's models, there's test, and there's views, right? So inside of my actual file, we then actually gonna go to my views, right? So this is where basically you will be actually rendering your pages, right? So what we then want to then do is I want to then just import a couple of things. So I'm just gonna say from Django, okay, .http. So just actually importing that, and then we're gonna just port. And what we want to do is we want to import some HTTP response, right? All one word. Right, so what we then want to do is we actually want to render out a page, right? So we actually need to create a function, right? So this is where you actually create, so here's a comment over here. Let me just do it over here. So we create a function, and I'm just going to call it index. So remember, I used to tell you that most of the time we have something called an index.html, right? So with development, most people or most developers name their home pages as index.html. So this is basically the index page. And remember, I also spoke to you guys about requests and response. So basically, we are creating a function that's going to send a request, right? And it has to have a return of HTTP response. So what do you want your response to be? So for now, let's just print out something that just says, hello, this is my Django app, right? Simple enough, and we press save. Right, so as soon as we press save, now the next thing what we then need to do is we need to actually configure this out, right? So I want you guys to actually navigate and go to my site, and then there is going to be a folder called settings, right? So in the settings file, I need you guys to scroll all the way down to installed apps. So remember, um, the name of my app is actually called my site. So we need to tell Django that, hey, we actually added something called my site. So we just need to tell it that this is my site, right? And that's about it. We can actually save. And what this actually tells Django is that, oh, okay, so now you've actually appended or actually added a new site to it. So now we can, I like to minimize this just so that I don't actually get confused. All right. So now I go back into my site. And now what I then need to do is I need to actually create a folder, right, called urls.py. So you remember what I told you guys about URLs? URLs actually help us to, it helps us with navigating, right? Meaning moving around. So now the next thing what I want to then do is Django, right, dot URLs. I want to import and I need to create a path, right? So this path basically says that, so I need to just obviously import all of views. So we're going to be also using views because now we obviously have to render out all of our templates, right? So the first thing is that we're going to actually create a URL path, a pattern. We're going to say URL patterns, and we're going to say equal. So this is actually this. And what does it actually take? So I need to tell Django that, okay, I need to create a specific path, right, with empty braces. And what do I then have to do is that, okay, I want to make sure that I actually want to make sure that I use my use function and I want to actually render out. So remember we created that function called index. So I actually want to render that out, right? And what do I then have to call it? Well, I'm just simply I can actually assign it a name and I can actually call it, what did we call it? We can also call it just index as well, which is perfectly fine. Right. So it's actually paths, not paths. And we can actually save that, right? So as soon as we save that, what we then want to do is let's go to my website, right? We can go to my website and we go to URLs. So as you can see, URLs basically just, so you can actually do, this is just comments, just telling you what you can actually do and everything, but we can just erase all of that. Now, another thing that we actually have to do is now we actually explicitly need to tell it where, how the website is actually going to look like in terms of our browser, right? So right next to path over here, just put a comma and you can just say includes. So just type in include over there, right? So now what does this actually tell us? So the URL patterns is going to say, so as soon as I hit the admin, so this is just for admin purposes. So you can actually create another path, right? So this path, basically what we want to then do is I actually want every single time I hit this specific part in my website, which is actually an empty path, I want you to actually include my what? So I actually want to actually include my site, right? So I need to tell it that please go to my site. And what exactly do you want from the site? Well, I want the URLs because remember, we're actually creating the path. right? Okay, then I need to come over there and I save my work. Now, guys, I know that this is quite tedious and it's quite hectic, but this, as the more you practice it, the more you actually understand how it works, because remember, we actually have to make sure that our infrastructure is actually proper before we can actually, make sure that our website is actually running. So there is a bit of configuration and some things that we actually need to change. All right. So if I just double check and check, all right. So what did I then just do? So remember, I created a my app um, application, and then in my URLs, I actually specifically said that okay, I want to actually, sorry, my views. I want to render out this hello. This is my Django app. Okay, that's fine. So I actually then have to tell Django that hey, I actually added an application. Where do I actually add that? I add that into my settings.py file, which is in my main folder, and I added it over there. Right. Once I'm done, what do I then have to tell Django? That, okay, I want to create a route, right? So basically a path, so that every time I actually hit an empty, so usually, I mean, as you can see, there's admin and so forth. And when you go into web development, you'll actually see why this is quite important, right? You have to explicitly name your paths, right? And what do I want to then do? I want to go into my site and I want to actually grab the URLs, right? So if I go to my site, right, and I go to my URLs, what is it they're going to say? Oh, okay, so it's actually going to call the function called index. So what is my index function? So we actually created where? In my views. So it's actually going to be calling this function. So if you don't understand, guys, as I said, it's totally okay. It's just really gonna take time for you to really understand the architecture of what Django is really trying to say. So if I actually save, and now let's actually run and test our website. So we can go down to our terminal. We can open that up once again. And let's see, what does it say? Okay. Okay, let me just create a new terminal. Right. So now let's see and actually test our website. All right, so obviously by now you guys obviously know how to um, start up your project, right? So we're always going to say Python nh.py run server. Enter. And let's just wait for it to start loading. All right, so it's checking. All right, it's fine. So now if we then open up our browser, let's go check, press refresh. And refresh. Oh, there we go. Awesome. Perfect. So now we know that our Django app is now officially open and up and running. All right. Awesome stuff, guys. So this is basically, do we have enough time? All right. So it seems like we just under a bit of time. But basically what I want to then quite quickly want to show you guys is, so I have this, hello, this is my Django app, right? So I hope you guys also understand the architecture and how I actually formed that. As I said, it is going to be a bit tricky for now because it always just takes some time and practice. I gave you the documentation in terms of the step-by-step guide how to do it. It does get a bit tedious, but when you start really understanding and start working with Django more often, it's like math, it's like riding a bicycle. It will just become easier and easier and easier and become second nature to you in terms of setting up your Python files, right? So this is basically the setting up file. If you guys can get to this point, honestly, well done, well done, well done. I myself had to literally watch about like 50 tutorials just to really understand how to get the setup just as perfect, right? So just a quick recap in terms of what we actually did today. All right. So I'm gonna take it all the way to the beginning. Right. So remember we created this folder, right, that we called our Python website app. We then started off by creating a project which we called my website, right? So what does this project actually have? It has all the files that we're going to be containing, and you actually will see I think from tomorrow when we actually add our templates. So remember the MVT model. Guys, I also highly suggest that you also just go back and do some research in terms of the terminologies that I've been saying, especially if it's like today's your first day joining us, or you still don't understand. It follows the MVT, so we still need to create our templates. So then what we actually did, we actually created our first app. And what did we call our app? We called it My Site. So now, as you guys can see, these two folders need to have a way of communicating with each other. Then what did we do is that we actually then went into my site, to my website, and we had to go to our settings and explicitly tell Django that we actually created a new site, right? So these are all the installed apps. Remember, My Site is an app, and remember, you can have many applications inside of a project, but you can only have one project. Okay, fine. Then what did we do? We created a file called URLs. What does a URL actually do? If you look into our browser, this portion over here is what we actually call the URL, right? And remember, in web development, there are two things that we really need to remember. It's something called a response and something called a request. So now we created a function, right, that is called index. So this index basically it takes a request as a parameter, right? So what does this mean? This means that, hey, Django, I'm actually requesting this page. So what is this page called? It's called index. And what does index actually do? It's just going to return an HTTP response, right? So remember yesterday I spoke about communication over the website, right? We as a user, we send a request, and then what does Google or what does YouTube send us? It sends a response. And then what is our response? Okay, we want to actually render out or show, hello, this is my Django app. So fine, so is understandable. We then also gave it a specific route, right, in our URLs. So to say, each and every time I hit a slash, right, I am then going to show. So for instance, guys, even if I do something like this, let me just give you an example, right? If I copy this path and I say, let's say, page, for instance, right? And what I want to then do is, okay, everything is fine. It's going to know that I need to go there. Let me just show you guys an example. All right. And let me just copy this. I'm just going to create another path. So what did I say? I called it page dash, and we'll just also call this page. Also just call this page, and let's say save. And if I go to my URLs, okay, that's fine. My views. Let me just create another function to actually show you guys why is it so important to explicitly show. So if I create another function, and remember I called it page, and this one is gonna just say this is my page app, right? So if I save, and you'll see Python. So Django, because our server is already running, it's just going to reload everything, and it's gonna check. It's gonna check. It's gonna check. Uh, oh, spelling page. So if I save, let's see if Django will be able to pick it up. So it's reloading. It's checking. Okay, that's fine. So if I then go back to my website, if I hit refresh, okay, you guys can see in my URL in my browser, right? I don't have anything. So as soon as if I say slash and I say page, right? You should then see that, oh, okay, now my page is actually now changed. Instead of my Django pay application, it's actually called page, right? So you guys can see how actually why it's so important to explicitly mention this is what we call URL pathing, in terms of I need to explicitly tell Django that if I go to this page, this is what you're going to render. So if I take out the slash page, you guys will see I go back to my Django app. Right. So pretty cool, pretty simple. And again, you guys can see that it's quite easy if you really, really put in the time and effort to really learn it. So I really hope that today you guys do see the cool stuff that we actually did with Django today, right? It's not really much, but at least now you've actually got a whole Django app that's actually operating. And what I'll also do is at the end of the series, I'll also upload this project that we were working on onto my GitHub repository, so you guys can always refer and go back to it. So that being said, guys, I think it was quite an informative session. Thank you so much, guys. If you've got any questions by now, please just make sure that you do. If not, you guys can definitely ask me with my socials. And thank you very much, guys.
Oh dear, there we go. I'm unmuted. Thanks, Kaketso. But doesn't look like anybody's got questions. Maybe you overwhelmed them again. Or maybe you've just explained it again so well.
Dr. Hans?
Hearing me?
Yes.
Yes, we have some. Yes.
Yeah, I did post something in the chat. I was asking because I was absent yesterday. How could I find the recording so I could catch up so that I'm on par for tomorrow?
The recordings aren't yet available. Let's see what I can do overnight. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday afternoon.
Thank you very much.
See you guys tomorrow.
Thanks, Kagetsa. Thank you very much. That was awesome. I'm going to try and get the recordings up tonight. All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right,
bye-bye. Cool. Bye-bye. Who started the recording?
What was that?
Let me just enter here.
And also one more question. Where